It was in the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Yehuda, that Hoshea, the son of Elah, began his reign over Israel in Shamron. He ruled for 9 years. He did what was evil from Adonai's perspective, although he wasn't as bad as the king of Israel who had preceded him. Shalmaneser, king of Ashur, advanced against Hoshea, and Hoshea became his vassal and paid him tribute. But the king of Ashur found that Hoshea was conspiring against him. He had sent messengers so that the king of Egypt and had not paid his tribute to the king of Ashur as he had previously done every year. For this the king of Ashur imprisoned him, putting him in chains. Then the king of Ashur invaded all the land, advanced on Shamron, and put it under siege for 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Ashur captured Shamron. He carried Israel away captive to Ashur, resettling them in Halach, in Hevor, on the Gozan River, and in the cities of the Medes. This came about because the people of Israel had sinned against Adonai their God, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt, out from under the domination of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. They feared other gods and lived by the customs of the nations that Adonai had expelled ahead of the people of Israel and by those of the kings of Israel. The people of Israel secretly did things that were not right, according to Adonai their God. They built high places for themselves wherever they lived, from the watchtower to the fortified cities. They set up standing stones and sacred poles for themselves on the high hill and under any green tree. Then they would make offerings on all the high places, like the nations Adonai had expelled ahead of them, and would do wicked things to provoke the anger of Adonai. Moreover, they served idols, something Adonai had expressly told them not to do. Adonai had warned Israel and Yehuda in advance through every prophet and seer. Turn from your evil ways and obey my mitzvot and regulations in accordance with the entire Torah, which I ordered your ancestors to keep, and which I sent to you through my servants, the prophets. Nevertheless, they refused to listen, but made themselves as stubborn as their ancestors, who did not put their trust in Adonai their God. Thus they rejected his laws, his covenant, which he had made with their ancestors, and the solemn warnings he had given them. Instead, they pursued worthless things and became worthless themselves, imitating the nations around them, whom Adonai had ordered them not to emulate. They abandoned all the mitzvot of Adonai their God. They made cast metal images for themselves, 2 calves. They made an Asherah. They worshipped the whole army of heaven. They served Baal. They had their sons and daughters pass through fire as a sacrifice. They used divination and magic spells, and they gave themselves over to do what was evil from Adonai's perspective, therefore provoking him, so that Adonai, by now very angry with Israel, removed them from his sight. None was left except the tribe of Yehuda alone. However, neither did Yehuda obey the mitzvot of Adonai their God. Rather, they lived according to the customs of Israel. Yes, Adonai came to despise all the descendants of Israel. He caused them to trouble and handed them over to plunderers until finally he threw them out of his sight. He tore Israel away from the house of David. They made Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, king, and Jeroboam drew Israel away from following Adonai and made them commit a great sin. The people of Israel followed the example of all the sins that Jeroboam had committed and did not turn away from them until Adonai removed Israel out of his sight, as he had said he would through all his servants, the prophets. Thus Israel carried away captive from their own land to Ashur, and it remained so to this day. The king of Ashur brought people from Baval, Katu, Ava, Hamath, and Sepharvaim, and settled them in the cities of Shamron, in the place of the people of Israel. They took possession of Shamron and lived in its cities. When they first came to live there, they did not fear Adonai. Therefore Adonai sent lions among them, which killed some of them. So they said to the king of Ashur, "The nations you carried away and settled in the cities of Shamron are not familiar with the rules for worshiping the God of the land. Therefore he has sent lions among them, and they are there, killing them, because they are not familiar with the rules for worshiping God, the God of the land. In response, the king of Ashur gave this order: take back one of the Kohanim you brought from there, have him go and live there, and have him teach them the rules of worshiping the God of the land. So one of the Kohanim, they carried him away captive from Shamron and came and lived in Beth El. He taught them how that they should fear Adonai. Nevertheless, every nation made gods of their own and put them in the temples of the high places which the Shamronim had made, every nation in the city where they lived. Thus the people of Bavel made Sukkot Benot. Those from Kutah made Nergal. Those from Hamat made Ishima. The Avim made Nivachat and Tertach. And the Sevarvim burned up their children in the fire as sacrifices to Ardamilach and Anamilach, the gods of Sepharvaim. So they feared Adonai, while at the same time they appointed for themselves priests from among themselves to preside at the high places, and they should sacrifice for them in the temples and the high places. They both feared Adonai and served their own gods in the manner customary among the nations from which they had been taken away. To this day they continue to follow their former pagan customs. They do not fear Adonai. They do not follow the regulations, rulings, Torah, or mitzvot, which Adonai ordered the descendants of Yaakov, to whom he gave the name Israel, with whom Adonai had made a covenant and charged them. Do not fear other gods or bow down to them, serve them or sacrifice to them. On the contrary, you are to fear Adonai, who brought you out of the land of Egypt with great power and an outstretched arm. Worship him and sacrifice to him. You are to observe forever the laws, rulings, Torah, mitzvot, which he wrote to you. You are not to fear other gods, and you are not to forget the covenant I made with you. No, you must not fear other gods, but must fear Adonai, your God. Then he will rescue you from the power of all your enemies. However, they didn't listen, but followed their old pagan practices. So these nations mixed fearing Adonai with serving their carved images, likewise their children, and to this day their descendants do the same thing as their ancestors. It was in the 3rd year of Hoshea, the son of Elah, king of Israel, that Hizkiyahu, the son of Ahaz, king of Yehuda, began his reign. He was 25 years old when he began his reign. He ruled for 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Avi, the daughter of Zechariah. He did what was right from Adonai's perspective, following the example everything David, his ancestor, had done. He removed the high places, smashed the standing stones, cut down the Asherah, and broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made, because in those days the people of Israel were making offerings to it, calling it Nachashatan. He put his trust in Adonai, the God of Israel. After him there was no one like him among all the kings of Yehuda, nor had there been among those before him. For he clung to Adonai and did not leave off following him, but obeyed his mitzvot which Adonai had given Moshe. So Adonai was with him wherever he went out to battle. He did well. He rebelled against the king of Ashur and refused to be his vessel. He drove the Plishtim back to Azal and laid waste to their territory from the watchtower to the fortified city. It was in the 4th year of King Hezekiah, which was the 7th year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, that Shalmaneser, king of Ashur, advanced against Shamron and laid siege to it. At the end of the 3 years, they captured it. That is, Shamron was captured in the 6th year of Hezekiah, which was in the 9th year of Hoshea, king of Israel. The king of Ashur carried Israel away captive to Ashur and settled them in Halach and Havor on the Gozan River and in the cities of the Medes. This happened because they did not heed the voice of Adonai their God, but violated his covenant, everything that Moshe, the servant of Adonai, had ordered them to do, and would neither hear it nor do it. In the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Ashur, advanced against all the fortified cities of Yehuda and captured them. Hezekiah, king of Yehuda, sent this message to the king of Ashur at Lachish: I have done wrong. If you go away from me, I will pay whatever penalty you impose on me. The king of Ashur imposed on Hezekiah the penalty of 10 tons of silver and a ton of gold. Hezekiah gave him all the silver that he found in the house of Adonai and in the treasuries of the royal palace. It was at that time that Hezekiah stripped the gold from the doors of the sanctuary of Adonai and from the doorposts, which Hezekiah, king of Yehuda, himself had overlaid, and gave it to the king of Ashur. From Lachish, the king of Ashur sent Tartan, Rav Saris, and Rav Sika, the king Hezekiah, in Jerusalem with a large army. They advanced and came to Jerusalem. Upon arrival, they came and positioned themselves by the aqueduct of the upper pool, which is by the road of the launderer's field. They summoned the king. By those answering the call were Elichem, the son of Hilkiah, who was in charge of the household, Sebna, and general secretary of Yoach, the son of Asaph, foreign minister. Rav Sechak addressed them. Tell Hezekiah, here is what the great king, the king of Ashur, says. What makes you so confident? You think your spoken words constitute strategy and strength for battle? In whom then are you trusting when you rebel against me like this? Now look, relying on Egypt is like using a broken stick as a staff. When you lean on it, it punctures your hand. That's what Pharaoh's king of Egypt is like for anyone who puts his trust in him. But if you tell me, we trust in Adonai our God, then isn't he the one whose high places and altars Hezekiah has removed, telling Yehuda and Jerusalem, you must worship before this altar in Jerusalem? All right, then, make a wager with my lord the king Ashur. I will give you 2,000 horses if you can find enough riders for them. How then can you repulse even one of my master's lowest ranking army officers? Yet you are relying on Egypt for chariots and riders? Do you think I have come up to this place to destroy it without Adonai's approval? Adonai said to me, attack this land and destroy it. Elichem, the son of Hilkiah, Shivna, and Yoach said to Rav Shekha, please speak to your servant in Aramaic, since we understand it. Don't speak with us in Hebrew while the people on the wall are listening. But Rav Shekha answered them, did my master send me to deliver my message just to your master and yourselves? Didn't he send me to address the men sitting on the wall, who, like you, are going to eat their own dung and drink their own urine? Then Rav Shekha stood up and, speaking loudly in Hebrew, said, hear what the great king, the king of Ashur, says. This is what the king says. Don't let Hezekiah deceive you, because he won't be able to save you from the power of the king of Ashur. And don't let Hezekiah make you trust in Adonai by saying, Adonai will surely save us. This city will not be given over to the king of Ashur. Don't listen to Hezekiah. For this is what the king of Ashur says, make peace with me, surrender to me, then every one of you can eat from his vine and fig tree and drink the water of his own cistern, until I come and take you away to a land like your own land, a land with grain and wine, a land with bread and vineyards, a land with olive trees and honey, so that you can live and not die. So don't listen to Hezekiah. He is only deluding you with what he says. Adonai will save us. Has any god of any nation ever saved his land from the power of the king of Ashur? Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim, Hena, and Eva? Did they save Shamron from my power? Where is the God of any country that he has saved its country from my power, so that Adonai might be able to save Jerusalem from my power? But the people kept still and didn't answer him so much a word, for the king's order was, don't answer him. Then Elichem, the son of Hilkiah, who was in charge of the household, Shivna, the general secretary of Yoach, the son of Asaph, the foreign minister, went to Hezekiah with these clothes torn and reported to him what Rav Sech had said. On hearing it, King Hezekiah tore his clothes, covered himself with sackcloth, and entered the house of Adonai. He sent Eliakim, who was in charge of the household, Sebna, the general secretary, and leading the Kohanim covered with sackcloth, to Yeshayahu the prophet, the son of Amoz. They said to him, "This is what Hezekiah says. Today is a day of trouble, rebuke, and disgrace. Children are ready to be born, but there is no strength to bring them to birth. Maybe Adonai your God will hear all the words of Ra Shachi, whom his master the king of Ashur has sent to taunt the living God, and will rebuke the message of Adonai your God has heard. So pray for the remnant that is left." When King Hezekiah's servants came to Yeshayahu, he said to him, "Tell your master that this is what Adonai says. Don't be afraid of the words you hear from the servants of the king of Ashur. Ashur used to insult me. I will put a spirit in him that will make him hear a rumor and return to his own land. Then I will cause him to die by the sword of his own land." Rav Shacheh returned, and having heard that the king of Ashur had left Lachish, found him making war with Libnah. Then on hearing it said that Tirhakah, king of Ethiopia, was in the way to fight him, the king of Ashur sent messengers to Hezekiah, telling him, "This is what you are to say to Hezekiah, king of Yehuda. Don't let your God in whom you trust deceive you by saying, 'Jerusalem will not be handed over to the power of the king of Ashur.' You will have heard what the king of Ashur had done to all the lands. They have completely destroyed them. So how will you be delivered? Have the gods of the nations delivered them? No, my ancestors destroyed them. Gozan, Haran, Ritzah, and the people of Eden, who were in Telasar, were in the king of Hamath, the king of Arpad, the king of the city of Sepharvaim, of Hena and Eva." Hezekiah took the letter the messenger's hands and read it. Then Hezekiah went up to the house of Adonai and spread it out before Adonai. Hezekiah prayed the following in the presence of Adonai, the God of Israel, who dwells above the cherubim. "You alone are God of all the kingdoms on earth. You have made heaven and earth. Turn your ear, Adonai, and hear. Open your eyes, Adonai, and see. Hear the words of Sennacherib, sent and taunt the living God. It is true, Adonai, that the kings of Ashur have laid waste the nations of the lands, and have thrown their gods into the fire. Those who were non-gods, merely the product of people's hands, wood and stone. This is what they would destroy them. Now therefore, Adonai our God, please save us from his power, so that all the kingdoms of the earth will know that you are Adonai God, you only." Then Yeshayahu, the son of Amoz, sent the message to Hezekiah. "Adonai, the God of Israel, says, You prayed to me against Sennacherib, king of Ashur, and I have heard you. Here is Adonai's answer concerning him. The virgin daughter of Zion despises you. She laughs you to scorn. The daughter of Jerusalem shakes her head at you, whom you had taunted and insulted, against whom you had raised your voice and haughtily lifted your eyes, the Holy One of Israel. Through your messengers you taunted Adonai. You said, With my many chariots I have ascended the mountain's heights, even in the far reaches of the Lebanon. I cut down tall cedars and its best cypresses. I reached its remotest corners and its best forests. I dug wells in foreign lands, and I drank the water. The soles of my soldiers' feet dried up the rivers of Egypt. Haven't you heard? Long ago I made it. In antiquity I produced it. Now I'm making it happen. You are turning fortified cities into heaps of ruins, while their inhabitants shorn of power, are disheartened and ashamed, weak as grass, frail as plants, like grass on rooftops, or grain scorches by the east wind. But I know when you sit and when you leave, when you enter and when you rage against me. Because of your rage against me, because of your pride that has reached my ears, I am putting a hook in your nose and a bridle in your lip, and I will make you return by the way which you came. This will be a sign for you. This year you will eat the grain that grows of itself. The second year you will eat what grows from that. But in the third year you will sow, reap, plant vineyards, and eat their fruit. Meanwhile, the remnant of the house of Yehuda that has escaped will again take root downward and bear fruit upward. For a remnant will go out from Jerusalem. They will escape. Those escaping will go out from Mount Zion. The zeal of Adonai Svaot will accomplish this. Therefore, this is what Adonai says concerning the king of Ashur. He will not come to this city, or even shoot an arrow there. He will not confront it with a shield, or erect earthwork against it. By the way which he came, he will return. He will not come to the city, says Adonai. For I will defend this city and save it for both my sake and for the sake of David's sake, for the sake and for my servant David's sake. The night the angel of Adonai went out and struck 185,000 men in the camp of Ashur. Early the next morning, there they were, all of them, corpses, dead. So Sennacherib, king of Ashur, left, went and returned to live in Nineveh. One day, as he was worshiping in the temple of Nisroch, his god, his sons, Adar-Melech and Shetzir, struck him with the sword and escapes into the land of Arad. So his son Esarhaddon took his place as king.